Welcome to Grow Money Business, the podcast dedicated to helping business owners grow both their wealth and business on their own terms. Here's your host, Grant Bledsoe.
Hello, everybody. Grant Bledsoe here. Welcome back to Grow Money Business. This week on the podcast, my guest is AnnMaria De Mars. AnnMaria is the founder and president of 7 Generation Games, which is an educational software company that makes games that teach math to kids and students. This episode this week is maybe a little bit off the beaten path, a little bit different than the content that we typically cover on the show about meeting that intersection between personal life, personal finances, and business life, business finances. But every now and then, I really like to interview someone who's had a large degree of entrepreneurial success. And the reason is that I'm really fired up about entrepreneurship in general, as you've probably picked up if you've listened to the show at all. I'm of the opinion that entrepreneurship is our best opportunity to leave a positive imprint on the world. And I wanted to have AnnMaria on the show today because she is a shining example of how that's worked. She's seen multiple problems in her communities where she's lived, in the jobs market, in education, and has launched businesses for the sole purpose of solving those problems. And she's had multiple successes along the way doing that. Coincidentally, she's also Ronda Rousey's mother, who is in the WWE and was formerly in the UFC as a very successful, one of the most successful female MMA fighters. So this is a great interview. AnnMaria has done wonderful things in the world, and I hope she continues to, and I hope you enjoy it as well. Hey everyone, I need to interject quickly to remind you all that nothing found in today's episode or any other episode of Grow Money Business should be considered financial, investing, legal, tax, fitness, or even relationship advice. It's content that you're free to use and to deploy on your own terms. And before taking any actions on content found on the show, please do consult with your tax professional, your attorney, or your financial planner. If you don't have a financial planner, head on over to threeoakswealth.com to learn more about what we do in terms of financial planning and investments and how we help clients on an ongoing basis. Hello, AnnMaria. Thank you for joining me on the show today.
Well, thanks for having me.
You have a unique story, and as we were discussing just a minute or two ago, I'm keenly interested in my professional career in just the intersection between personal life and career and business interests, and just in this entrepreneurial process where somebody has an idea for a product or service that helps some subset of people or businesses, adds value in a unique way. They take a risk to go out there and offer it to the market. And if it works out, it's mutually beneficial for their customers and themselves. And you're a very accomplished entrepreneur, and you have taken quite the route in your life to get there. I'm really excited to hear your story and maybe soak in a little bit of wisdom. Why don't we start here? Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and your background, and then we can dig into the details along the way?
I'd say my background kind of lends to why I do what I do. I left home at 15, graduated from college at 19. There's probably an open file somewhere for my last foster home I ran away from looking for me. And my ticket out is I was good at math. And because I was good at math, I got a scholarship to college. And when a lot of my friends were in prison or having their 4th baby in their 20s, I was getting my MBA. And that made the entire difference in my life. That and judo, which is a different story because I actually volunteer teaching judo still. But because
we'll get to judo. Why you're gifted in math, you say. You must have had an incredible drive and focus to pursue academics at that age too.
To be honest, no.
No? Doesn't go to class?
Terrible student. I went to more parties than I did classes. Like I said, I went to college at 16, right? So, and I had no adult supervision, but I had to keep my GPA up to keep my scholarship. So that was my motivating factor.
Got it.
And they paid for me to live in the dorm and get fed, and I didn't have to work as much. And so that was a second motivating factor. No, I was not a very focused student. I think now when I have students who aren't the best, this is it all coming back to you. In my programming classes, they would say, oh, you do this many programs that work to get a C, this many to get a B, this many to get an A. And a lot of times by the third week of the semester, I had enough to get a B and I just took off and partied the rest of the semester. So no, the TA, the professor would try to track me down. You just need to do 2 more things, get an A. And I'd say, I'm good. So it was not particularly mature. And then I went to graduate school. I went for my MBA. I was 19. I'm graduating. Nobody really wants to hire you when you're 19. And they were right because I was not wildly mature, right? And one of my professors wrote on one of my papers, you're a really good writer. You should go to graduate school. You should get an MBA. And this is 40 years ago, right? When MBAs were not nearly as common. So I called my grandmother, who, went all the way to 8th grade, a little island in the Caribbean. And I said to her, Nanny, what do you think? And she said, well, what do MBAs do? And I said, I don't know, but they make a lot of money. And she said, yeah, you should do that. So that was my planning, right? Because I was good at math, I liked it, right? Not that I studied that hard, but I liked math. I was good at it. And I was able to get an MBA. And then at the time, again, still not terribly mature, but had no family connections, nothing. But because at the time, anybody who could program a computer was just a hot drug on the market, right? I could get a job. And that made all the difference for me. And when I looked back, I could see that a lot of kids, they start out in math and at some point they hit some difficulty, whether it's fractions or division or decimals or exponents or negative numbers. But at some point, they run into something they don't understand. And they start to think, I'm bad at math. I suck at it. I hate school. I'm never going to graduate. And they quit. And if we could intervene at that point and they could understand it, we could change that thinking from I suck at math to, well, I can do math and maybe I will stick it out in school because my mom really wants me to graduate, and it would make a difference in their whole lives. The other thing about math, unlike a lot of subjects, is it's hierarchical, right? So if you missed understanding what causes civil war, you could still do okay in the next year in history when you're learning about World War II. But if you didn't understand division, you're not going to get fractions, right? If you didn't understand multiplication, you're not going to get exponents. If you don't understand exponents, you're going to be in my statistics class saying, Dr. De Mars, why did you put that little 2 up next to the X? So we need to intervene when people are struggling, and it will make a huge difference in people's lives. And when I go to investors often and say this, everyone talks about education and how good it is. And we've been running this company, 7 Generation Games. We incorporated in 2015, and we've raised 2 seed rounds. We have a community round open right now, which if you don't know what a community round is, I'd be more than happy to talk about crowd equity. But the bigger venture capital funds, they are all about, I'd rather invest in something that delivers warm cookies to software developers with a lot of money. We talk a lot about education, but as far as investing in it, we don't do it. And for me, because it changed my whole life being good at math, because I see so many people that they give up on their dreams because they're not. I mean, I used to teach at a tribal college. Well, now I teach at a different tribal college. But many years ago, I taught at a tribal college. And I would see students come in and they're going to be a software developer, a physician, whatever, and an architect. And then those same students, a semester or 2 later, have either dropped out or they changed their major to communications or early childhood, or those are fine things if that's what you want to do. But they did it because they couldn't get through college algebra. They couldn't get through calculus. And when you see something that you think, well, this should be changed, right? And everybody talks about how things should be different. Who was it that said, I think it was some famous Russian writer, but somebody said everyone wants to see change, the world change, but no one wants to change themselves. And yeah, so we hear all of these, everybody from politicians to venture capitalists saying how important education is. Do you want to invest some money in it? Oh, no, I'd rather invest it in renting out luxury villas. So I've always been a bit of contrarian, and I went to some investors very early on and said, I have this idea. I think I should make video games that would teach math and it would be fun. And we could make them with stories that are not very often seen in games. It's not very often seen in education. Native American children, Latino children tend to do poorly in math. Let's do video games with stories about Native Americans, Latinos. And pretty much people said, yeah, we don't think you'll make money at that. Or you have been programming statistics your whole life or doing databases. What makes you qualified to do video games? And one person even said, to my face, we know what successful startup founders look like. And they are white and Asian men who dropped out of Stanford and Ivy League schools. And I said, can I swear on your podcast?
You can swear, sure.
I said, fuck you, I don't need your fucking money. I'm going to do it myself. And I went out, they got $2.5 million in small business innovation research funds and $100,000 in Kickstarter. And I did do it myself. Well, not all myself. I roped in a couple of co-founders. I hired some amazing employees. And here we are, 20 games on the market, 150,000 users. And a lot of those companies they invested in crashed and burned. And I may look more like Mark Zuckerberg's maid than Mark Zuckerberg, but I did found this company. So there you go.
So take us through the chronology here a little bit. You went to college and then you went to grad school. You were particularly good at math. You had a professor who thought you were a good writer to push you to go to grad school. But when it sounds like there was quite a gap between obtaining your MBA and launching this video game company. Am I getting that right?
Oh yes, there is a very big gap.
Okay, so let's fill in the gap then. What happened after grad school?
I went to work for Honeywell doing data analysis, and then I got hired by General Dynamics as an engineer and did that. And then I met this really cute guy who was my boss's boss's boss, and there's all these anti-nepotism rules. And so I had to quit my job. And he said, well, what would you like to do? And I said, I always liked school. And this is funny now, right? But at the time I was pregnant and I asked my obstetrician, would it be damaging to the baby for me to be sitting in front of a computer 12 hours a day? And at the time they used cathode ray tubes. This is a long time ago, right? And he said, well, we don't know because there's very, very few women engineers, very, very pregnant women engineers. And we don't know. And I thought, well, we don't know isn't a good enough answer, right? Now, of course, now we know that that's perfectly fine, right?
Yeah.
So thank you to all you other women who are the guinea pigs, not me. So my husband said, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I like school. And the University of California, Riverside was right down the road. So I thought I'd go get a PhD, which is very funny because now when I talk to students and they have everything planned out, and my plan was, the doctor said, ma'am, you're pregnant. So I thought I'd have a baby. That was my plan. And then there was a university there. I thought I'd go get a PhD. So I went and I specialized in applied statistics. And they said, well, you should pick an area. And my great planning, I picked educational psychology because they had the most grant money to pay me.
Okay.
So
no particular interest other than that?
It was statistics. You can apply statistics to anything. They said, we'll pay you. I said, we're good. Okay. I wanted to be programming a computer, right? I didn't care what the data were going in or out. So when I was at General Dynamics, I was predicting which missile would blow up on the launch pad. When I was at the University of California, I was predicting which family would decide to place their child in an institution. I mean, there were children who were severely disabled. It wasn't just like random, you're annoying and it's Tuesday. So
we've all been there. I got 3 kids too.
I got 4. I don't agree. So anyway, I got a PhD. Then I got a job right out of grad school as an assistant professor up in North Dakota. And they got this grant for serving Native Americans with disabilities. And I'm from Los Angeles, right? No one knows less about North Dakota Native Americans than me. And I told the department chair that, and he said, well, you won't be prejudiced, which is true because I knew nothing, right? So I said, well, I'm from the University of California. I can write grants. We're good at that. So I said, do we have a Native American faculty member? And they said, we just hired our first one, which in 100 years is pretty pathetic, right? Nellreen Yellowbush. So I called her up and I said, you don't know me, but we're going to be friends because I have grant money. I need your help. So she kind of brought in some people from the reservations. And I said, what do you need? So this would be kind of the good laying of the ground for running a startup, right? Because the first thing is find out, what do you need? And they said, we need money for early childhood. So I wrote some grants and I got that. And so I kind of did that thing for the next 20 years, taught college. My husband had an accident and then died. And so I had 3 little kids to support. And so I taught college. I wrote a lot of grants. I was doing a lot of consulting on the side. And eventually I said, this consulting is paying way more than my gig full time at the university. So I went into consulting full time and started my first company, which did customized software evaluation and pretty much did that for 20 years. And in the process, I had a friend who had been president of Tribal College in North Dakota. Well, one of them, there's 4. And he called me up one day and he said, I am tired of people having to leave my reservation and find work elsewhere because there aren't any professional or technical jobs here. He said, we should start a company on the reservation. I don't want my kids to choose between leaving their culture and getting a good job. So we started Spirit Lake Consulting and did that for years. And then my partners in that, one of them, so we did training for reservations around the country. We sold, so this is a long story, okay? We sold slices of the internet back when only half the country had internet access. We would go to someplace like the American Diabetes Association, say, you want to get out information on diabetes. These rural places don't have internet access. Give us permission. We'll put your stuff on a CD. We'll go into places that don't have internet. We'll teach people how to use a computer. We'll teach them how to get this stuff off the CD. And we kind of made like websites that you could get on CD. So we did that. We did some of the very first online training. And then one of my partners got stolen away. She got offered a job running a casino and they just paid her a bunch of money. So she had to leave. And my other partner got cancer. And he, 10 years later, has totally beat the odds. But at that point, he took over the training part of the company. I took all of the employees and most of the contracts and started another company. They're just focused on customized software. You want a database that your clients come in and they enter. You've done these, right? You go to the doctor's office, there's an iPad, you enter the data, it goes into this database. So I did that kind of stuff because I basically paid good money. And then here's where the games come up. So I've been working in software and teaching and all this for 20 years and supporting my kids. And now I've got married again, had another kid. I just keep having them. And so now I've got 4 kids, but by then my older kids were going to college. One of them was going to the Olympics. So I didn't need so much. And Eric and I, my friend that I'd started the company in Spirit Lake with, went to Washington. And we analyzed the National Indian Education Study. This sounds like, why would this develop a company? And I think this is weird because companies come out of anything, right? We found the National Indian Education Study has data on every American Indian and Alaska Native kid in the country that's in school. We found that the more kids learn their culture and language in school, the worse they do in math. And I thought that was weird. And Eric, who was president of the school board on his reservation, said, come on, there's only so many hours in a day. If you take an hour out every day to study Dakota language and culture, that's an hour less that kids get. So we're going back to the airport in a cab, and he turns to me and he says, I'm not accepting this. I'm not accepting that my grandkids will either learn their culture or learn math. You need to do something. Now, to this day, why it was my responsibility, I don't know. I brought this up to Eric since. And he says, well, it was you and me and the cab driver in the cab. And he goes, I didn't have anything. And the taxi driver wasn't going to do it. So you were left. So, yeah. So I came up with this idea to do games. And that's where we got to going out to raise money. And people would do it. So I did it myself.
So there's a couple things that I want to highlight that are particularly cool to me. One of them is I always felt like entrepreneurship is your best opportunity to make an impression on the world. There's something that you see you want to fix or help. Entrepreneurship is truly, I think, the best way to make an impact in whatever it is that you're trying to change. And the first thing that stuck out at me is you're in North Dakota as a newbie. You have no idea of the concept of the landscape, and you go and learn a little bit about it, and you partner up with somebody over there, and they're running into this issue where their people have to choose between leaving the reservation and their culture to obtain a technical job, or staying at the expense of their own career. And so you use the tools at your disposal to solve that problem. Maybe not totally directly with the product that you're creating, but indirectly by locating it there, right? And so I'd like to back up to that a little bit more, because the way that you described it, the purpose of the company was to solve that issue, but you kind of skipped over what the company actually did. What product, what service were you offering in that firm that brought the jobs to that area?
Well, that was the one where, as I said, we sold slices of the internet. So we would contract or get permission from everybody from, the Center for Disease Control to the Juvenile Arthritis Foundation to put their information on CDs. So there's a lot of organizations out there that don't want to charge for it. They just want to get the information out.
And where did that idea come from? It
came from my brain.
So the problem is that we've got to bring more jobs to this region, and hey, it seems like these organizations have information they want to get out, but not everybody has access to the internet. What if we go collect some money from them, and in exchange, we bring the information to the areas without internet access?
Well, no, we didn't collect money from them. So these people want their information out, and these communities want their staff trained, and they can't afford to send every single person who is working, say, in the Indian Health Service to Minneapolis to get trained.
So I see. So it's locally their organization that want their people trained that are your customers. Okay.
And there's all these different places around North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, in these very rural communities, right?
Right.
And if we're centrally located in the middle of North Dakota, it's cost effective for us to go to each of them.
Yeah.
So we can charge them for the training. We can send our people to Standing Rock or to Turtle Mountain or to Fort Berthold or to White Earth, wherever. And it's cost effective for us because basically we just need to pay their mileage.
Mm-hmm.
And then we create, so the product that we had was, and again, all these things are old hat now, but at the time they were brand new, sort of blended learning. So we're bringing you in a CD. We're saying, here's all of this stuff on a CD, which at the time, a lot of people hadn't seen a CD before. You pop it in this computer, and here's how you use the computer. And so we had websites that we pretty much created on the CD. And if you are a person that is working with someone who is bedbound, here's how you safely move them from the bed to the chair, and how you give them a bed bath, and here's all these things. And so all of that would be on the CD. We'd show them how to access the information. We'd teach them in a computer lab, and then we would leave them with the CD, and we might come back again. So we charged them for the training, and the training included our person coming in once or twice, and then it also included us leaving them with the CDs that we had created, and we did them on a number of different topics. So we would do one on early childhood education, one on working with kids with special needs, one on brittle diabetics, and all these different things. So we saw a need in the communities, and we saw a way that we could develop a product to fill it. Now, of course, 99% of the country has internet access. So that was a lucrative thing for a while. And then we went into more online training. And then that's when April took off and Eric got sick. And so he just kind of continued with sort of professional development training. And I went off and did the games.
Sure. So you had the relationship with Eric from this venture, he mildly suggested that you fix this issue of the more time spent learning about your culture, the worse you do at math. Now there's your next problem that you go and solve. So what happens next? Are you putting a business plan together? Are you rushing out to try to find money to? Did you have the solution in mind for that already? How did everything come together?
Here's a really funny thing. I had the solution in mind 40 years ago, but there were two problems with it. When I was doing my doctorate, I had this idea about using computer games to teach math, but I had my PhD in 1990. So back in 1985, when I was getting started, you imagine what computers could do, right? A lot of it was just text-based. And so there was nothing like the hardware capabilities we have now. So I did some text-based games and that, and it was okay, but it wasn't anywhere near the kind of graphics and the animation, everything we do now. So I kind of dropped that idea, on top of which my husband had a genetic disorder he was born with. So I knew that if anything happened, I would be taking care of these three kids. So what I tell my students all the time is entrepreneurship is a risk. And when you're the sole support of a husband who is terminally ill and three small children, that is not a good time for risk. So I just sort of set it aside and went on with the things that paid a lot of money. And then when Eric brought this up, I said, I had this idea about making games to teach math. And now, of course,
now the stars are aligning. The kids are
right,
older.
exactly. Yeah. I'm at a point where I could afford to take a risk in my life. The capabilities for graphics and animation and sound for computers are light years ahead of what they were. And so that's when I tried to get funding, and nobody would give me funding. And I went to like all these angel investor groups and you hear all this, we wish there were more women in tech and we wish there were more Latinos. Yeah, right. So they didn't wish hard enough to give me any money. So I wrote some small business innovation research grants. I wrote one to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which has, and everybody's like, agriculture? They have a tiny little fund, part of their fund, for rural economic development. And what I argued is kids not being good in math certainly damages the economic potential of an area, and you should give me some funding to try to help kids in these most rural areas get better at math. And they did. And the first studies we did showed the kids who played our math games, their math scores went up 30% over the 10 weeks.
Wow.
Where the kids who were in the control group school, theirs went up 10%. Because, of course, they're going to go up, right? They're in school, hopefully.
Yeah, right.
But ours went up 3 times as much. And so then we got some more funding. And you'd think at this point that investors would be throwing money at us, but they still said, well, education is a hard sell, which it is. It's really hard to get in schools. They're very conservative.
Yeah.
And so we just kept getting money in research grants. And I did a couple of incubators. We were in an ed tech incubator in Salt Lake City. The startup Chile is fabulous. If it really helps if you speak Spanish. Don't believe them if they say you don't need to speak Spanish.
I would imagine so.
all of the sessions they do are on the pitches are in English. But once you get out of the building, less than 3% of the people in Chile speak English. So anyway, we're in Startup Chile. We got funding and support from them. We got a National Institute of Health grant. We got a large contract from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Once COVID happened, you could imagine that software that you used to learn online became something everybody wanted. So we're the flavor of the month.
Yeah.
It's kind of how that went.
So what does the organization look like now? You have 150,000 users, you said. What's your staff look like? How have the last 12 months gone with online learning, maybe plateauing, maybe going down a little bit now that kids are getting back in the classroom? What does the organization look like today, and what's next for you?
It didn't go down, which was a very pleasant surprise to me. I think a lot of teachers got more used to using online tools, and they're still using them. Of course, we didn't see the skyrocketing growth we did the last couple of years. We actually downsized our staff because we had been growing super rapidly. So we needed a lot of people to bring in a lot new games and a lot more. And so we went from overnight, we went from 6 people to 12, and now we're back down to 10 because we tend to keep a very, very lean budget if we possibly can.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's wise in general not to hire people until it's almost painful. And we've had a couple of people get great opportunities. And we're very proud of that. We hire a lot of people who are very non-traditional and give them, in my opinion, great skills. And generally when people leave us, they go to really good positions. So we had a couple people leave. We decided not to fill those positions because we thought we're not at the point now where we're running and running and running to keep up like we were when the pandemic first started. We probably will add some more people in the next year. But I believe this comes from being founded on a reservation where sustainability is kind of a key value, that we try not to be one of those scale all the way up. And then if we have to lay everybody off, we have people who have been with us pretty much since day one. And that's enabled us if we need to scale up to be able to do it right away because they know our systems, they know our code, they know our processes. So we're doing a lot with a small amount of money and a small number of people. And if we got some more money from some more investors, we'd be doing more. Damn it.
So are you out pounding the pavement for more money now? What is on your agenda now?
I'm with the back office tech person. Maria is out pounding the pavement. Maria is our CEO. We are doing pretty well. We just have been pushing more into customized software development. This would be a case study in what not to do for marketing. If people ask me what was our marketing strategy for our customized software arm, which is probably most of our business right now, is we waited for people to call us up and offer us money, which is not much of a marketing. Well, we started out.
It can work sometimes.
Yeah.
It worked for you.
Well, we have, I think, pivoted almost unintentionally a few times. So we started out thinking we'd be selling to schools, right? And we also sold to parents because basically anybody has money. And I remember we did our first Kickstarter, and some people would message us and say, are these games only for Native Americans? Because my children struggle with math too. And Raya would write back, and this is why she's the CEO, and say, if you have $10, these games are for you. But her point was, she said, I played Super Mario Brothers and I was never a plumber in overalls, and these games teach math and they're fun. So about half of our sales were to parents, and then the other half were to schools. And then COVID happened, and all of a sudden 90% or more were to schools. And 10% were to parents, not because the parent mark went down, but because the schools went way up.
Mm-hmm.
And in the process of some of the funding we got, we'd made a game in Spanish and English because we work with a lot of communities that have kids that are bilingual. And it's really tough for the teacher to have to try and give the same lecture in English and Spanish, even if he or she is bilingual, which a lot of teachers aren't. So then we get a call from this person who says, hey, could you do those games in Lakota in English? And I said, yeah, we could code them, but we don't speak Lakota. And he says, funny thing, I'm calling from Pine Ridge. And so we're in Lakota. So they paid us to do these games in Lakota and English. And then some other people said, well, how come there's not a game in Dakota? And we said, well, because these folks paid us to do it. And they said, well, we've got money. So then we did a game in Dakota English. And so then we had these other folks call up and say, hey, you made these customized games for them. Could you make a game on quartiles? He said, well, I have a PhD in applied statistics. That's kind of my thing. So we just started having people call us up about, can you make a game in this? And now we're starting on one literally today on the Bozeman Trail because some group out in, I think they're in Wyoming, called up and said, hey, we want to do this game. We have a board game. We'd like you to make it a computer game. So since that started to be more business, now we actually promote it. And we're a group going to the Johnson O'Malley conference in Las Vegas that has a lot of nonprofits and promoting. So it was a case study in not how to do your marketing.
But you have plenty of good use cases, hopefully a couple testimonials you can use for the convention booth.
Most important, we have their money. No, we did a good job for them. We did.
That's very cool. So where does judo come into play? I know that's been a big part of your life over the years too.
Well, that's funny. I was a bad kid. I was always in trouble, and I was on top of all that, a short, fat little kid with really thick glasses. I wear industrial strength contacts, and I need to wear glasses over my contacts to read. So, and my mom said, you cannot spend your whole life sitting in your room and eating. And she put me in the car and drove me down the YMCA and pushed me out and said, go join something, and drove off. And back then, the Title IX hadn't passed. So most sports did not allow girls. And I had three choices. I had swimming, which if you're a fat little girl, you don't want to put on a swimsuit. And I had track, which short, fat little girls don't run very well. And then judo, the instructor let girls do it, which, my daughters, when I hear this is bizarre to them, right? What do you mean they let them do it? But back then, they just didn't have girls in sports very much. And he had a sister who wanted to do judo, so he let girls do it. And she was a black belt by the time I walked in. And I could fight. I mean, I had three brothers, and we fought all the time. And I was a short little person, so I was hard to get under to lift up. Mm-hmm. And I was a little chubby. It was like throwing a dorm room refrigerator, right? And I was hard to push over. And I got good at it right away and started winning stuff. And next thing you know, I was national champion, and they were sending me off to France.
Wow. At what age were you national champion?
I won the junior nationals. The first time I went to them, I was 16. I won. And then I went to senior nationals, I think the first time at 17, and I got third. And then I went when I was 19 and I won. And then I went to grad school and took a couple years off. And then my friend Becky calls me up and says, hey, they just put women in the sports festival. Show up at practice. I hadn't been a judo in 2 years. I went and I won the sports festival. I went back to training. And no, they just put women in the world championships. That was it. And she said, yeah, get back on the mat. And so I did, and ended up winning the world championships. Well, in between there, I had a baby. So I missed the 80 world championships, the first one, because I was in grad school. And then 82, I had Maria. And then 84, I won.
Wow. So what impact has that? Athletics has had a profound impact on my life, just from the team sports aspect. I played baseball growing up, and that has taught me a ton of really important lessons that have been very valuable in my professional career. What did that experience do for you?
The biggest thing that it did for me that translates into entrepreneurship is perseverance. Because what people don't really understand, I think, about running a startup is it is a long slog. And when you look at it, I could eat ramen for 6 months. I could work 80 hours a week for 6 months. But those overnight successes usually came after somebody spent 10 years developing all those skills and developing all those networks. Mm-hmm. Like for me, when we started with our first games, I had to talk somebody into replacing math class with a game. And those 4 teachers will be my friends for life, right? But you have to have spent time making connections. You have to have spent time learning those skills. I had to know how to program a computer. I had to know PHP and SQL and JavaScript. And what I didn't know, I had to learn. That's the same with getting to the elite level in a sport. You don't go, as my daughter Rhonda, actually, we have her in one of our games, and she's encouraging the character in the game. And she said, you don't run up a hill 3 times and expect to make it to the Olympics. I think there are too many people that start a company and think that they're going to put really hard work into it for 6 months, and then they're going to have an IPO. it's not like that. When you hear about people being serial entrepreneurs, often they're serial entrepreneurs because the first one or two
So they
companies
failed a
failed.
few times along the
Yeah.
way. Yeah. Yeah. That's a great metaphor. And the analogy I've heard used quite a bit is the iceberg illusion. You see people with a lot of success, but what's really gone into you're only seeing the top 10% of the iceberg over the water. The 90% of hard work and failure and grit and perseverance is stuff that you don't see behind the scenes that takes a lot longer than 6 months to get to that peak of success. And that athletics, I think, is a great analogy for that. Is your judo experience what got is so your daughter is Ronda Rousey. You have 4 kids, all girls, all girl. Were the other 3 involved in martial arts at all?
I made them all try judo. So Maria, the oldest one, tried it for a few months and she said, not for me. She started running track when she was 9, ran track all the way through college. My second daughter, Jennifer, is 13 months older than Rhonda. And she told me when she was probably 9 years old, I hate all sports and you will never make me like them. And I put her in everything. She could have been, she had all the athletic talent that Rhonda has. I mean, I put her in judo, I put her in basketball and swimming and volleyball. And she was right. I never did make her like them. She has a master's from USC. She's a history teacher for Los Angeles School District. She's phenomenal. But yeah. And then Rhonda went to 2 Olympics, UFC champion, WWE. And then my little Julia, she won the junior nationals in judo, won the California State Championships in judo. She was doing really well. And when she was 11, she started judo when she was 4. When she was 11, she said, I want to play soccer. And I said to her, these other girls started soccer when they were like 5, 8 years old. And she says, Mom, I know I don't have the skills that some of these girls do, but I'm not afraid of anybody. And Julia's a tiny little thing. She played defense. She played all through college. So yeah, every one of my kids is different.
That's how it always turns out, and it's surprisingly how different they are. Mine are little. Our oldest turned 6 here a couple months ago, but watching their personalities kind of branch out and grow in their own unique directions is one of the most rewarding parts of the whole experience. So
you have the first one and you think that all the things they do are because of you and your parenting, and then you have the second one and they're completely different, right?
Yep, exactly. Completely. And then you have the third one, and if they get a smile and a wink from you every now and then, that's about good. So for all the girls did judo. They all went in their separate directions, some in sports, some not in sports. But for Rhonda, she obviously excelled at it. But at some point, she made the leap from judo to ultimate fighting, right? Was that a direct leap? Did she go straight into fighting from judo?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, Rhonda has always been very good at math. And there's a thread running through there.
The beta tester for all your programs.
Well, she is. Actually, she's also super good at gaming. She had a contract with Facebook Gaming for a long time to stream online. I think she might be getting another contract with somebody else, but I'm not sure. But anyway, yeah, she's super into gaming too. I used to do that, compete in those gaming things as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, she was super good at math. And she looked at after she won an Olympic medal and said, this is not going to feed me. And I don't care what any of these other people think. I think I can make money in the UFC. And it's funny, and she brings this up all the time. When she told me she was going to go into this ultimate fighting thing, I'm gonna be a professional MMA fighter. I said, Rhonda, that is the stupidest fucking idea you've ever had. And coming from you, that's saying something. Well, because at the time there were no professional MMA. There was no professional MMA for women, right? So It wasn't that I doubted that she was a great athlete, but it's like me saying, I'm going to go to the Olympics and win a medal in embroidery. Well, they don't have one.
Yeah.
But she was right and I was wrong, and she never tires of reminding me.
Did that move give you pause? I mean, MMA is a lot more brutal, a lot more potential for serious injury than judo, I would expect, right?
Yeah, I'm really glad she's not doing it anymore. I think it was a very wise decision on her part to shift to WWE. And again, she's very smart. And people, her whole life of it were looked at because she was this pretty little blonde girl and she was this super athlete. And I think she realized, number one, the probability of concussion and severe injury in MMA. I mean, we were at a fight where this guy had a traumatic break and you could see his bones, poking out. This was just god awful. So she realizes that. And secondly, that the career path for somebody in WWE is much longer. And depending on how you arrange things, you can make more money. So it's not just looking at it per day, but, okay, you might make more money in UFC this year, but if you can compete in that for 5 years and WWE for 20 years, it's obviously which is a better deal. Like I said, she's good at math.
Yeah.
And, Conor McGregor, I don't agree with a lot of his things, but he made a really good point one time when people were talking trash about him or something he did in some fight. He said, "You have hurt me feelings. I will wipe away me tears with me money." There are people that when she left judo said all kinds of things about Ronda. Oh, she's just for the money. When she left UFC said all kinds of things about Ronda. But she says, "I'm not going to be young, good looking, athletic forever. And I am locking this up as fast as I can."
Yeah.
And yeah, that's why I say you could be a professional athlete. But Maria, my oldest daughter, when Rhonda first started making money, she sat her down because Maria had worked for Sports Illustrated and ESPN as a sports writer. And she said, "Rhonda, I can't tell you the number of times I covered somebody's multi-million-dollar contract. And 7 years later, I covered that same kid's bankruptcy." She said, "You need to get an accountant. You need to write the first check you write needs to be to the IRS." And so it's interesting to me often when I'm talking to kids in middle school or even college and they're saying, "Oh, Dr. De Mars, I don't need this course. I don't need to know math. I'm going to be a professional athlete." And it's sad. I'm on the California State Athletic Commission now, and one of the things we're working on is a pension fund for MMA fighters because so many of these young people, they've never given a thought to math and they have no plan B. And one day they're going to be 40 and not able to do what they're doing anymore.
Right. Well, that's a wentreful endeavor. So looking back on it, and your entrepreneurial ventures, it sounds like were mostly after the girls were a little bit older, right? And so you're raising 4 kids. They were a little more self-sufficient by the time you're, doing the hardcore startup lifestyle. Did I get that timing right?
No, that's not exactly true. I was doing the Spirit Light Consulting. We started when they were probably, Julia was maybe not even born. So no, I was doing a lot of it right in the middle of trying to send them through high school and elementary school. But the difference is the first companies I started were a lot less risky. So they were businesses that were selling software services to Fortune 500 companies or selling customized software to government entities and things like that. So yes, it was starting a business, but it was much less risky than something like selling educational video games.
So you're balancing the risk level of these various ventures with the period in your life to where it makes sense, is what you're saying. Yeah. That's a huge, that match has to be in place for any venture, I think. Looking back on it over all these years, if you had any of these endeavors to do differently, what changes would you make? What would you do differently?
That's a really good question. I get interviewed a lot, and I don't think anybody's asked me that before.
That surprises me. I ask that almost every interview.
I don't know what changes I realistically could make because at the time I had different priorities than I do now. So, for example, people always laugh when I say this, but it is the God's truth. When the kids were really young, if you were an ass, there was 100% surcharge for putting up with you. If I was charging $1,000 a day at the time, it was $2,000 a day for you. And people would pay it because nobody else would work with them. Now I don't work with those people because it's just life is short. If you're the kind of person that yells at your consultant and insists that I work on Christmas Eve and stuff like that, I would do it. I would just bill you up the wazoo for it. And that paid for Maria to go to NYU, and it paid for Rhonda to train in Europe. So those things were not pleasant, but at the time I needed the money. I did, some of the work I was doing was with very nice people, but it was kind of boring and repetitive. I worked with a really big pharmaceutical company that completely was the opposite of the stereotype I'd heard of big pharma. And these people were making drugs for cancer patients, and they walked around like, we save lives. This is the greatest thing in the world. And, that was nice, but I was doing one repeated matrix analysis variance after the other. So it was kind of boring. And the worst kind of work where it's boring, but you can't zone out because you have to focus on it. So there were times when I did stuff that was kind of boring and not real satisfying, but it paid a lot of money. And I had kids in college and training for the Olympics, and I needed the money. So at each point, there were things I would rather be different. And if I had known a way to make equal amounts of money working for super nice people doing fascinating work, I would have done that. If anybody comes up with that, where everything aligns and is perfect, then they should email me and I will be right on that.
It's interesting to hear you say that. So like I mentioned, I asked that question a fair amount. And in the last, couple of years, both of my grandmothers passed away, and they lived long, wonderful lives. But, I had a chance to chat with them both at various times over the last 3 or 4 years. And I asked them both, looking back, you've had such a wonderful life. You have all this family, and you've done very well. What changes would you make if you had to live it over and make some of these choices again? And there were a couple of minor things that they both brought up. But at the end of the day, we make all our own choices, and given the same situation, it's the same person, same biology. I mean, it's rare that I ask that question. I have asked that question a lot. And the response is, well, I know I made this huge mistake when I was 41, and I would never, ever do that again. That's rarely the case. And it's just kind of an interesting observation that your response really speaks to. Well, what else? What have we missed, AnnMaria? This has been a really great discussion, and
about crowd equity or investment, and I think that would be an interesting thing.
Okay.
So a lot of people don't know what a community round is because it's fairly new, and a lot of people don't even know what an accredited investor is. So I will give the 30-second explanation that the Securities and Exchange Commission doesn't want me running out and selling the reusable pie crust company to new immigrants, people's grandmas who don't have, well, maybe your grandma's super sophisticated in finance, mine was, but people who don't have a lot of sophistication about companies and ripping them off, right? So it's to prevent scams. So for you to raise funds for a startup, you can only raise them from accredited investors, people who make at least $200,000 a year, have a net worth of at least $1 million. A few years ago, the SEC passed a regulation allowing companies to raise from the public, but there has to be a certain amount of vetting. So basically, we went through WeFunder. There's other organizations like this. So this company comes in and they do all the due diligence. They check your books. They scrutinize you to make sure you're not lying about your pipeline and your balance sheet and all that stuff. And then you can go out and raise money from the general public and have people invest in your company. So like when you do Kickstarter, which a lot of people are familiar with, you're putting in money for a product. I say, I'm going to make a game. If I get 1,000 people to give me $50, I'll make the game and you all will get a copy. If in crowd equity, you're investing in a company. I'm saying, I've got this company. I make educational games and the tools to make them. If you invest $1,000 in my company and we sell it for twice as much down the road, you'll get $2,000 back. So that's how crowd equity works. Basically, we decided to go that route because as much as people like to talk about diversity and blah, 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 less than 3% of venture capital funding goes to women-owned companies. And if you want to know what percent goes to Latina, like Hispanic women-owned companies, I'll bet you can't even find that dot down on the chart, right? So we decided instead of going that route, I mean, we have been successful with seed rounds somewhat, and we're very grateful to every investor that we have. But we decided instead of beating on those doors that seem to be pretty well closed to people who don't fit a pattern, that we would do a community round. And it came about because I believe that the good you do comes back to you. some students came and said, can we use your company finances for a class project? And I guess they'd asked a bunch of people, and people told them, no, go away. We're a company, we're important, we're very serious business people. And we're like, sure, we were students once. Well, to cut to the point, their class project, one made it to the finals of some big finance competition. They were students at Wharton Business School, and Wharton Impact Ventures said, hey, if you guys want to do a community round, we will send you out to all of our alumni. So they haven't even done that yet.
That's quite the network.
Yeah, they're going to do that in 2 weeks. But before they even got to that, we opened up the community round, and we already raised $70,000, and it'll go out to Wharton's network in the next couple of weeks. So anybody with $100 can invest. The minimum investment's $100, which in our previous seed rounds, the minimum was, I think, $5,000 and then $20,000. So it's very different. And it lets people who maybe would like to put $500, $1,000 into something and see if it pays off, and also put it into something that could do some good in the world. And that's why I think crowd equity was good for us, because venture capitalists are into making as much money as they possibly can.
Mm-hmm.
And they're looking at investing in something that might return 100 to 1.
Yep.
And, somebody explained it to me, and I really appreciate this. She said, if your company's making $5 million a year, and it may make $10 million a year in a few years, that's good. 5 million a year is good, 10 million a year is better. And say I'm working with a customer, she manages people with very high levels of wealth. She said, so I have a customer who's $500 million, and they put in $500,000 in your company, and your company doubles in value. And so 5 years from now, my customer has $500.5 million. How much has that changed their life? Zero, right?
Yeah.
So they're looking to invest in things that might change from being worth making 5 million a year to $1 billion a year. And that's the kind of things that they're interested in investing in. A lot of people who invest in us say the same thing. I would like to get my money back. I realize this is a risk. I'd like to get my money back. I'd like to make money. And I'd also like to see my money make the world a little better.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other byproduct there is the venture capital firm needs that 100x to move the needle, because the pie is so big for the fund. And so if you take the money, you're compelled to take all sorts of crazy risks, because the investor wants you to get to 100x, not 3x in 2 years, which is still a massive amount of growth. You have to take all these undue risks when you might not want to. And I agree that the crowdfunding as a concept is a wonderful innovation that hasn't been around that long, really, since that SEC ruling. A question I have for you is, how does the governance work there? Is the group that does the vetting on behalf of the underlying investors, do they have voting power at all? Do the underlying investors have voting power? How does this round work in your circumstance?
No, the vetting organization, in our case, WeFunder, they take a percent of the raise, and then the company picks one of the people to be a lead investor. So out of all the investors, and generally you are going to pick somebody who is not invested just $100, so I suppose you could. Our lead investor has a lot of expertise in sales. And since we're moving into more and more of the customized development, and as you heard, our marketing plan had been sitting there waiting for people to call us up, we figured having someone with deep expertise in sales would be good for us. So,
sure.
And it was somebody that we knew. It wasn't just, and then of course, sometimes some of the people who invest more are really, really busy. So it's somebody we knew that had expertise we wanted, that was willing to do it.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, this has been great, AnnMaria. I know you have an event you're getting ready for later this evening, WWE event with your daughter. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I really appreciate your time and willingness to kind of walk me through it, because you've clearly had a substantial positive impact on the world. And back to what we were talking about at the beginning, these kinds of efforts are our best opportunity to make an imprint on the world. And you're a great example of that. So thank you, and keep up the good work.
All right. Well, thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in to Grow Money Business, the podcast dedicated to helping business owners grow both their wealth and business on their own terms. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you digest podcasts to ensure you don't miss out on future episodes and announcements. And feel free to submit questions to growmoneybusiness.com.